we are geared as human beings to move toward pleasure and away from pain. So what has to happen is, it has to be more painful to stay the same than to change. And that's where we get tripped up and where it's so hard to change those habits because we still think of it as the change is so much harder than just staying the same.
Welcome to the EQ Gangster podcast, where you will learn practical tools to grow your mental and emotional health and intelligence to be the best version of yourself, both at work and at home. It is real, raw, and transformational. The journey of emotional growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. I believe in you.
What's happening?
What's up, Super Angela?
Can you hear
How
me
are
okay?
you? Yeah, I hear you great.
I am fantastic.
Oh, that's great to hear. It's a long time no see. It's been
I
forever.
know. Listen, so our interview was so fantastic that I decided at 4:30 this morning that it was going to be this week's episode.
No way.
So my team hates
Wow.
me for this. I'm not very good at following a plan, but I just kept thinking about it. Like I had reviewed the whole episode and I was so excited about making the resource guide and the whole thing. And I was like, F it, I'm just doing it. So I did
That's
it. So
great.
that's what I was doing at 4:30 this morning, is finishing the resource guide. And
Wow.
I had already edited the episode, so that was easy. I just had to put all the things, like make the form and the landing page and all of that.
Wow, you are beast mode. Do you always wake up at 4:30?
Yeah, I get up between 4 and 4:30. I'm always working by 5. So I typically
Wow.
meditate, journal, all the healthy people
Yeah.
things, and then I'm
Yeah.
usually working by 5. Yeah.
And you're done at what time?
Oh God. I feel like
Did
I'm
you-
never done.
Okay.
Because I own sober living houses too. So part of why I get up so early in the morning is because nobody else is awake, right? That's like the one
Right.
piece of
Right.
time that I can actually be super focused and super productive. Because once the rest of the world wakes up, I'm pulled 1,000 directions. My
Right.
phone
Sure.
is blowing up. I get 125 to 150 emails a day. All the social medias, you know what I mean? Like it's
Wow.
insanity. And then I have
Right.
14 guys in sober living houses. So it is,
Wow.
yeah. So once the rest of the world wakes up, like it's a miracle if I can get anything done from that point. So just start
Wow.
super early and I get a handful of hours that I'm hyper focused and hyper productive. And then I go to the gym and come home and shower and get ready for the day. And then who knows what happens after that.
That's awesome. So, and you're sober living. So the sober living house is is that is that like a whole program that you've put together?
Well, no, I mean, it's not programming like outpatient or anything like that.
Okay.
We are regular houses in regular neighborhoods, just a group of guys living together with a little bit of accountability, right? Like they definitely have some structure and I'm super hands-on. So, nothing kind of falls through the cracks. I'm very there.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I moved a guy in one house yesterday and was there a couple hours, and then my houses are right down the street from each other. And then I went to the other house and ended up hanging out with those guys for like 3 hours and ordering pizza and watching the Royals game because the Royals are in the postseason and we're all so excited. So yeah, it's yeah, I'm very around.
And like, are you so you said 14?
Yeah, I have 2 houses, 7 guys in each house.
14 guys? Okay. And so are you like mentoring them and coaching them?
I mean, the ones that
You
want
know,
it, for
how's
sure.
that process?
They all have access to me as much as they want, right? Like they can call me anytime. We
Okay.
have a Sunday night meeting that's required. It's community group, and it's the one time of the week that we're all together at the same time. So we kind
Oh,
of touch
awesome.
base, like, how are you doing? How's your week? How many meetings did you make this week? How's life? And then we cover house stuff, right? Like, do we need light bulbs? Is anything broken? Whatever. Um,
Got it.
so some of the guys I have incredible relationships with, right? Like some
Okay.
guys like call me for everything. I help them
Wow.
fix their marriages and communication. We work on all that kind of stuff. I'll help them rebuild their credit. I do that a lot with some guys,
Wow.
rebuilding their credit, getting better jobs, being a better employee. Like we work on all kinds of stuff, dating. Um, I always tell them, the majority of relapses start with one sentence. And that sentence is, so I met this girl,
No way.
and that's all it takes.
Seriously.
Seriously, yeah. Like we
You're
say in AA,
kidding.
like the two biggest reasons people relapse is finances and romances.
Wow.
I mean, we are compulsive people by nature. And
Wow.
and we thrive on pleasure, right? Like everything
Right.
for us is pleasure. So it's
Right.
impulsive, compulsive. We don't make great decisions, certainly early in sobriety. So relationships is one of the ways that we can get pretty crazy. We being people with addiction, it's just one of the ways that life is very challenging for us.
Sure.
And you see a lot of dysfunction in that.
So that's super fascinating, and I guess shouldn't surprise me now that you made the connection for me, because obviously in a romantic relationship, your emotions are elevated. And if you have lower self-awareness and equally low self-management skills, our default would probably be towards whatever our coping mechanism or survival mechanism is, or addiction, fill in the blank, right? Right? Is that kind of the connection?
Well, and you take away your primary, right? So for me, like as soon as I removed alcohol from my life, my brain is immediately looking for something else to attach to because I still have all of that compulsive energy and I still have that need for pleasure. I need the dopamine hit, addiction is a disease of more. So if I do something and like it, I want more of it. It doesn't matter what that is, right? That can be work, that can be boys, that can be my dogs, that can be ice cream, my family. Like it doesn't matter what it is. If I do it and like it, I want more.
Yeah,
Period. Now,
right.
obviously, this many years into recovery, I have a lot more, emotion regulation and I can control myself better. But think about like guys at my sober houses, these guys are brand new sober, like in their
Oh,
first 30 days, 60 days, like they have zero
wow.
control of anything. And you just took
Wow.
away their primary coping mechanism. So they're going to
Wow.
default to something because we need the dopamine hit. So most most of the time for men, their secondary addiction is typically sex and or porn. And for women, secondary usually is food. Sometimes it can be love
Yeah.
addiction. But more often than love addiction, it's just unhealthy relationship patterns, right? Unhealthy boundaries, codependence. It doesn't usually dip into real full-blown love addiction. So for women, most often it's food is our secondary.
Where do our addictions come from?
Oh, God. $1 million question. So, addiction is so freaking hard because it's so multifaceted. There are so many layers. And it is like the stars have to align just right, and I think that's why there's so few of us. It seems like there's a lot more now, and the numbers are definitely higher since COVID for people struggling with addiction issues, but we are a very tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the population overall. And there are I mean, there are a few theories. The thing that makes the most sense for me is what we call the biopsychosocial theory. There's a biological component, right, in our genetics, and they have shown where we do have a genetic predisposition. It runs in families. That is very real. Um, there's a psychological component, right? Because it's almost everybody on the planet has some trauma. People with addiction typically have a little more. Not even necessarily, in the professional world, we talk about big T trauma and little t trauma. Big T traumas are the things that you would think of, right? Combat, sexual assault, violent crimes, things like that. That's big T's. Little t traumas are the things that just happen as a part of everyday life, right? Car accidents, the death of someone close to you, or the death of a loved one that was really fast, unexpected, sports injuries. One of the hardest interventions I ever did was on a young girl who had been a ballerina her whole life, and it was her only plan, and she got injured. And all of a sudden, her entire identity was ripped away from her. That's trauma. So there's all these little life things that create trauma in us, breakups, divorces, huge trauma, but they're small t traumas. And trauma is accumulative, right? So it piles up on top of each other, which a lot of people don't know either. So there are all of these layers that really have to come together. And then the other piece, that's the social piece, is like your environment. Like, how are you exposed to substances or behaviors? Like, did your parents have a liquor cabinet when you were a kid where alcohol was just more accessible? Or did you see your parents always having a drink and that's how they connected or unwound or connected with friends or celebrated, right? So there's that social piece of it that's just, what did you learn about whatever substance, right? Alcohol obviously is the biggest one because it's everywhere and it's so celebrated and socially acceptable. Um, and it's just in your face everywhere you go. But so it's like all those layers kind of have to be there. And that's also why getting sober is so freaking hard because you're battling all of those layers and they're so deep seated. And I feel like people think that we decide to get sober and like we just make the decision and live happily ever after. And it's like, dude, I have to make this decision 1,000 times a day in everything I do, right? Every person I hang out with or don't hang out with, every place I go or don't go, how I prioritize my time and my self care. All of those pieces play a role in my sobriety. Like everything I do, I'm either getting one step closer to a drink or one step farther away from a drink. But like you have to decide that 1,000 times a day.
That's huge. And out so two that I am working through right now, like we talked about, I think last week, was is my people pleasing addiction and my food addiction slash you can also add in there sugar addiction. So people, I guess maybe three of them: people pleasing addiction, food, and sugar. And I feel like I've done a lot of growth and healing in the people pleasing area, but I still have it. It's not, I still
Yeah.
haven't like fully kicked it. And the food and the sugar also is still there. And here's how I know. So your 1,000 decisions a day is what I'm getting to is my my addictions have been so deep seated that many times I don't even realize until after I see 15 Heath wrappers next to my desk. I'm like, where did those come from? Right. And it's like, oh crap, did I just eat 15 freaking Heath bars? Like, you're joking me. Right. Like, it's like my brain almost shuts off. So you're like, when you say, 1,000 decisions a day, it's like sometimes I don't even realize. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. And that's habit, right? There's some conditioning there. Habit, I feel like habit kind of gets minimized because they're habits, right? We talk about them all the time. We all have them, but people don't really understand how powerful habits are and how hard it is to break them, especially when they're habits connected to your pleasure center. Because that's what you're talking about. That's pleasure. That's a dopamine hit, right? It's the same reason we overshop. It's the same reason everybody's on dating apps. It's the same reason that Jeff Bezos is a multi gazillionaire. I mean, it's that pleasure, and they call it comfort food for a reason, because food and sugar especially hits those buttons in your brain, and it does create a sense of comfort, and it creates a sense of pleasure, and that's ultimately what we all want. I think you said this, excuse me, on my podcast, right? We are geared as human beings to move toward pleasure and away from pain. So what has to happen is, it has to be more painful to stay the same than to change. And that's where we get tripped up and where it's so hard to change those habits because we still think of it as the change is so much harder than just staying the same.
Right. That's great. That's excellent. Excellent. Okay. Angela, you've been in this space for a number of years. What are some addiction insights that you feel most people are not aware of?
I would say I would say the number one thing I think where people trip themselves up, right, is getting hung up on there's a couple things. One is getting hung up on the thought of never being able to drink again, right? And I always talk about I think I just did a social media post about this like yesterday maybe. I always talk about you can't use your day 1 thinking to figure out how you're gonna feel on day 30 or day 60 or year 2, right? Because your thinking is gonna be so different. That's why we talk about 1 day at a time, right? Just chill the F out, let it all come together, keep showing up and doing the right things. Don't worry about the rest of your life, right? I can't even think about next week effectively, like I need to stay in the moment and stay in today. So don't get tripped up on that stuff because you're thinking you're gonna grow and evolve at such a pace that once the event or the thing you're worried about drinking, the vacation you're worried about, whatever it is, once that rolls around, your thinking is going to be so different if you're really working your recovery, right? The other thing that people get really stuck on, hang on, I just lost my train of thought. So I hope you are good at editing.
No, that's totally fine. No
It
sweat.
came back to me and then it left again.
I, I've got another question for you if you're ready for it.
Okay.
Okay. What do you miss the most about
Hang on, you muted too fast because there's a little bit of a delay.
oh, okay. What do you miss the most about your addiction?
Nothing. There's not a
Mm,
piece of it that I miss.
wow.
And
That's
listen, I
awesome.
drank a lot of years and had a lot of fun, right? It wasn't my whole drinking life was not dark and terrible. I drank a lot of years and had a lot of fun. The last few years got really ugly. But but prior to that, I had a great time, it was a wasted decade for sure. I didn't accomplish anything, but it was my 20s. I think, for me, that was just the right move, and I had a lot of fun. But there's not a piece of it that I miss. Number 1, I would never wanna be young again, ever. You could not pay me $1,000,000 to be young again. Um, Youth is really fun, but you definitely have a tendency, I think, when you get a little bit older to look back and go, "Oh god, I'm so glad that's over." I'm glad I don't have to feel all of that confusion and overwhelm and insecurity and finding myself and what do I wanna do and who am I gonna be in the world, and, like, I would never go back to any of that. And I would say the same thing about my drinking life, a lot of it was really fun, but there's nothing that I miss. I mean, my life is 10,000 times better sober than I ever could have dreamed of drunk. A lot too because drinking really holds you back. Any addiction really holds you back. And when I got sober, I made a promise to myself that I was not going to let my life be dictated by fear anymore. because that's how I lived in my addiction. I was so scared and so insecure, and I had all these things I wanted to go do, and I wanted to see the world, and I wanted to take swing dance lessons, and I wanted to do all these cool things, right? And I could never do any of it because I was so broken and so fearful of following through. And what will that be like? And are people going to judge me? And is anybody going to make fun of me? And am I going to be good at it? Like everything was just fear based. So when I got sober, I was like, F that, dude. I am not living my life like that anymore. I'm doing everything. So in my sobriety, I mean, I've traveled the world. I've been scuba diving all over the world. I've done a couple shark dives. I just did a shark dive in Cape Cod. I do everything like learning languages, starting businesses. It's been absolutely incredible. So it's hard to look back on my drinking life and miss like sitting on bar stools.
Wow, that is awesome. Is there such a thing as a positive addiction?
No. I think we can have some compulsions that can be positive, but when you get into full-blown addiction, it's really addiction because it's causing you some negative consequences and you're doing it any damn way. Right? Like that's when you know you've crossed a line, is when you see that it's affecting your life in a negative way, certainly affecting relationships, affecting your job, affecting how you feel about yourself. When you're having negative consequences and you're still engaging in the behavior, that's addiction, right? So, and I've had to watch this even with work, and I'm a single person, never married, no kids. So I have an exorbitant amount of time that I can put into work. I don't have any distractions. And sometimes I love that. And I've also almost been hospitalized for stress and exhaustion. So I have to be very mindful because it feels good, right? I work and I'm good at it, and there are accolades that come with it. And the podcast keeps growing, and all of that feels really good. And I want to do a better job, and I want to be more of service, and I want to provide more content. And I can definitely get carried away with it, right? And it starts affecting my health, and my stress level gets crazy, and then I'm not thinking clearly, and I got brain fog, and that's unhealthy.
Got it. Man, that's a great that was very helpful just in terms of like once something starts to have a negative impact, that's probably an addiction. Like for example, jujitsu, where I was doing jujitsu, I got to a point where I was doing jujitsu, man, 6 days a week, which was amazing. It was awesome, you know, but it was a lot of, it was probably 2 or 3 hours a night. So that's, man, almost 15, 20 hours a week, which for that season was awesome. But I was also noticing like, man, I'm getting a little burnout, and I was also noticing the impact that it was having on me mentally and emotionally when I wasn't there. I'm like, man, this has impacted me a lot not being there. Have I given too much control over to jujitsu, so to speak, right? Because of the dynamic and stuff. And so um, that was something that, which I would argue overall is jujitsu is a, I think, very healthy outlet. But again, to your point, once it crosses over the line into negative consequences in my life or someone else's, that's where it can become kind of like you said, an addiction. Okay, here's a question. What what is the relation what is the relationship with addiction and identity?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Now, it depends on. This is gonna be a hard question for me because I was a bartender, right? I was a bartender for 20 years. So alcohol was my entire identity, right? It was everything I did. And it's so funny when I started working in addiction and people would say to me, "Well, I really want to quit, but drinking is a part of my job." And they'd be like a mortgage banker or something. And I'm like, "No, no, it's not actually a part of your job. You just made it that way, right? Like I was a bartender. It was really a part of my job, but you are okay." But it does become it becomes what you're known for, right? Like all my friends knew that I was the drinker, just like all my friends know now to call me for dessert, right? Now I'm the dessert guy. But back then it's like I was the party girl. Like if you want to go out and get spicy and mix it up, Angela was the person you called. If you want to drink all night, Angela's the person you call, right? Because I had no limits. And and that was fantastic, but it's very confusing and difficult, right? Then when you get sober, because that's what your relationships are based on. And it's the only version of yourself that you know. So it's like, how all of a sudden I have to shed this whole skin and I have to be this other person that I've never been before. I don't know how that person thinks. I don't know how they act. I don't know where they go, what they do. I have no idea how to be this other person that now all of a sudden I have to be or learn how to be, so it is hard. And then what do you call your friends to do? Right? And everybody gets scared about losing their friends and it gets weird. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, it definitely can get weird. You're going to have a couple of friends that will hang. They're ride or die. They love you. They want to support you and they're going to hang out with you regardless of what you're going through. Right? But your drinking friends where your relationships were really just based on drinking together, those people are probably not going to kick it with you anymore, And I reached out to my drinking friends always when I got sober and I was like, hey, do you want to go have breakfast? Do you want to go see a movie? Like I was throwing out some non drinking things so we could still spend time together, but their lives had stayed the same. They didn't have any interest in going to breakfast or going to a movie because they were still going to bars and partaking in all that stuff. So it's hard to figure out like who the new identity is when you've never even met them. Like, how do you put that person together when you don't even know what it looks like?
Massive, massive points, Angela. How for you in your journey, so imagine back 20 years ago or however long, whenever it was that you started to make the transition from, to your sober life, how okay, how long was that? How long did it take you to figure out the new Angela, 2.0 or whatever version you were on? How long did that take? And what were some of the key milestones of you discovering this new, healthier version?
So I really shut the door on my old life in a split second. Like I was done with it. I had a terrifying rock bottom moment. I crashed my car at 70 miles an hour on the freeway. I hit another car. I thought I killed the guy that I hit. It was a horrible, horrible moment of my life. The guy that I hit was fine. I was actually the only one injured. But in that moment, I knew I could never drink again because it had never crossed my mind that I could hurt another person. I didn't care if I hurt me, right? I hated me. I wanted to die every day just for the pain of being a drunk to be over. I didn't care about me at all, but it never crossed my mind that I could hurt somebody else. And then it was all the what ifs, right? Like, damn, what if that guy had a kid in his back seat? You know what I'm saying? Or like, what if I was on a side street and he was on the sidewalk? Like all of these things. And I had so much guilt after my accident because nobody hates anybody more than a drunk driver, right? We're like the most hated people on the planet, rightfully so. But to think like I took all the actions that could have cost someone their life. And for whatever a higher power moment, 1,000% a higher power moment, my outcome was different because a lot of people don't have that outcome. A lot of people, I sat in AA with 2 people when I was brand new sober that both went to prison because they crashed and killed somebody. So for whatever reason, my outcome was different, but my actions and my choices were exactly the same. And I had an enormous amount of guilt for that. I was scared to death to drive for a long time. But I knew I was done, right? I slammed that door shut. I was so grateful for it to be over. And I pretty much instantly threw myself into AA. Now, you are talking about a couple of decades ago. We didn't have all these other programs then. I don't know that I would have chose something different, even if we would have had options. But I found a meeting that was close to my house because I'm lazy. I knew it had to be close or I wouldn't go, right? And they had multiple meetings a day and it was in my neighborhood, so I knew that it would be, people like me, I would fit in, and I went every single day and I loved it. And it was absolutely life-changing. I was so excited about building a new life. I didn't care at all about my old life. I was just grateful to be out of it. I had no idea what it was going to look like. I had no idea who I was going to be. I just knew every single day I had a safe space to go to where these crazy fools, alcoholics, are the best people on the planet. We're the smartest, funniest, most loyal, genuine, generous, loving people. And I got to go to a room and sit with these people every day, and they just loved me and they accepted me and they laughed with me. And we made a lot of inappropriate jokes and we had lots of coffees and we'd all go to dinner and just all of us. It gave me, I always say AA is the cheat sheet because all I had to do was show up. It did all the hard work for me. All I had to do was walk through through the door and be in that room. And it gave me a new life. It gave me something to focus on, something to put my energy into. It allowed me to feel good and have people love me despite what I had been through and who I was that I didn't like at all.
That is amazing. Amazing story. Thank you for sharing and your vulnerability. In the so now you have helped, let's say, hundreds, if not thousands of people along their addiction recovery journeys. So you've got your data point of you, but now you've got this much broader, greater data set to kind of pull from. What have you found most helpful in increasing the likelihood of a long-term recovery from addiction?
I think the greatest indicator is people's level of commitment in the very beginning, right? Like I said, I went to a meeting every single day, and you'll hear people make all kinds of excuses of why they can't do that. And sometimes people can't do it. I get it. Like kids, spouses, jobs, running kids around to different places and sports and school events. Like time is limited. There's no question. At the same time, people have been getting sober for a really long time and have been going to meetings every day for a really long time. So I didn't miss a meeting for 5 years. Now, I was very fortunate. I had time that I could do that. But I'll tell you this, there were times in my life, certainly farther into my sobriety, the first thing I did was interventions. And when I was building my intervention practice, I worked a full-time job. I went to school full time, and I was building my intervention practice and traveled almost every week. And I never missed a meeting. So, there were times I had to go to a 6 a.m. meeting or a 6:30 a.m. meeting. Now, did I love that? No. But now I'm the same way with the gym. If 5:30 is the only time I can make it there, then that's where my happy little buns is going to be because it's a priority. And that's the key. Is what is your level of commitment to it? How much of a priority is it for you? If you want to come in and kind of half-ass it and have dip your toe in and think, oh, maybe I might do this, but I might still drink again one day. Well, don't be surprised if you drink again one day because your commitment's not there. It's not your priority. It's the same thing with food and sugar, right? When I quit sugar, I had an accountability partner. My friend Bob, and I would text him. I go, Bob, I'm going in this store, and usually I will get this particular bag of gummies at this particular store because I really could live on gummy bears and ice cream if I had my choice. That's all I would eat 24/7. And I have rituals everywhere I go, every gas station, every convenience store, every single place I go, I have a sugar ritual. So I'd text Bob. I'd be like, Bob, I'm walking in this store. Usually I would get this thing. I'm not getting it. And then I would make it through the store and come out and I would text Bob and go, I made it, dude. I didn't get any candy, because it was my priority. Now, does that seem silly? Of course it does. Is that what I needed? 100%. That's what I needed. It has to be a priority. I have to set reminders in my phone, just like my self-care and mental wellness. I have to set reminders in my phone to remind me to take a break and do a little self-care something, say some affirmations, do a 5-minute meditation, or do some non-sleep deep rest. I don't know if you're familiar with NSDR. It's one of my favorite things to do. Um, there are all these little things, but it has to be a priority. And sobriety is no different. However much you are committed to it is how well you're going to do with it, just like anything else in the world.
Okay, so let me throw this out at you. So as a long-time addiction guy, let's say today, okay? And this is, I think you already very familiar with my personality just the last time we talked. If you were to ask me, if we were in person and you got eyeball to eyeball me and said, Noble, what is your commitment to stop eating sugar, stopping a food addict, and stopping a people pleaser? I would dead square, flat footed look at you in your eyeballs and say, I am 1000% committed. Today, right now, looking in your eyeballs, give me 5 minutes, right? And I'm like, I want the candy bar. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like my ADD, ADHD kicks in, and it's like
Yes.
I forget my commitment level, right? That I had made in that moment. Like, Noble, like, dude, I've got a mouthful of freaking uh uh uh, uh Reese's peanut butter cups or whatever, right? And it's like, I forgot my like, and I can't tell you how many times I've done so. Like, there have been moments where I have been dead committed, and then next thing you know, and it varies. Again, full transparency. I've been committed for hours, right? I've been committed for days. I've been committed for weeks, and maybe the longest has been months. What I found is the healthier I get emotionally, the longer I'm able to hold the commitment. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I have so many. But the first thing I want to ask you about is how much do you know about self sabotage? Because that's what you're talking about, right? So, and listen, we're all terrible at
Stop,
listen,
stop,
I've quit sugar
stop.
a couple of times too. Like I get it. I get it. I go through the ups and downs. I have all the same things that I'm battling, but you have to understand how self-sabotage works, right? And where you're going to look me in my face and tell me how committed you are, but then I'm going to ask you, well, how are those candy bars even in your house? Because we have to make a series of choices just like drinking alcohol. Relapse doesn't just happen. There are a lot of decisions I have to make to end up with a drink in my mouth. I have to think about it. It's always premeditated because it always starts as thoughts first, right? And that's where here's your commitment. When as soon as that thought is there, I got to tell somebody. If I don't tell on myself for having the tiniest thought, I just went through this a couple months ago, and my little crazy drunken brain said, ooh, this is when people would drink. Like, I don't even want to drink, right? And all of a sudden, tequila was the love of my life. And I was like, oh, like you're so stressed out. This is when most people would just drink. And tequila sounds really good. And I immediately, literally pulled over to a parking lot and texted 5 people. And I was like, you will not believe what my crazy brain just said to me. I'm not going to let that thought get any bigger, right? Like I have to get that thing instantly because if I don't tell on myself, what I'm really doing is protecting my option to follow through on it. because I don't want anybody to know. I want to keep it to myself. So when I follow through, nobody knows. So it always starts as a thought. Then I have to argue with myself and fight about it, right? Am I really going to drink? Am I really going to get the ice cream? Is that really what I want? It's not what I really want, but that's how I feel. I want it right now. I don't care about future me. I want to serve right now me, which is self sabotage. We got to have that battle usually, right? Then we throw that out. We have to retrieve the substance. Usually there's some planning, especially if you're married and got some kids and they know you're sober. Then you got to plan something. You got to be a little sneaky, right? You have to get it and then you have to drink. Alcohol does not chase you down the sidewalk and force itself down your throat. A candy bar does not chase you down and hold you hostage and force itself in your mouth, right? So there are all these little choices, just like you're getting one step closer to it or one step farther away from it through those 1,000 decisions a day. So I would say that your commitment just isn't starting early enough, right? I can't have sugar of any kind in my house. There's no way because I'm obsessive, I'm compulsive. If I have something in my house, that is all I will eat until it's gone. I will make myself sick, I will make myself miserable, and I will eat every bit of it until it's gone. So it doesn't enter my house. It just can't. I know who I am. I know who my brain is. I know I can't be trusted. So it can't be in my house.
What do you like most about who you've become?
Mm. I love that I'm just a good, genuinely good human being because I never even thought I was capable of just being a good person. To be good, to be honest, to be service minded instead of solely self serving, which is how I lived my whole life, right? It was all about me and what I wanted and what I needed and manipulating all the pieces to get what I wanted and what I needed and have everything go the way I wanted it to. Um, I never thought I could be good. And to just be good is a phenomenal feeling.
What do you feel are a couple of your superpowers?
Oh wow, I'm a good quitter. If if it's abstinence, right? I'm really good at not having any, right? I quit drinking really easily. I quit smoking cigarettes really easily because you don't have to have any. This is where food and sugar and those things will trip you up too. And, for gambling, it's money, because there's no abstinence. It's like you're really in a state of triggered all the time. And that's why those things are so much more challenging and also socially acceptable and everybody else is doing it. And it might cost you your life, but it's still gonna be so far down the road that we don't really think about it, right? Where alcohol could have killed me at any moment, right? Or me killed somebody else. So it was much more dire. But when it comes to food and sugar and things like that, it's a little bit different.
So, in addition to being a great quitter, obviously you got a truckload of other superpowers. What you have transferred the drive that you sounds like you've had for many years into some incredibly productive things, not just for you, but that are impacting a lot of other people. What are some other areas that you maybe didn't know were in you during the alcohol phase of your life, that's like, wow, crap, like, so you said I didn't know, like, man, it's just, it feels so good to be good and be a good person and service minded. Like, what are some of those other maybe superpowers that you've discovered about yourself that have really been a blessing to yourself and others?
I would say my ability to love people is definitely a superpower. I love love, and I love to love people. And I love to make people feel loved and accepted and no judgment and just warm and fuzzy. And we can fix everything. There's a solution for everything. But just really loving people a lot. I love really hard and I love to love people. And I'm a super nerdy person like that too. Like I am the person that will just text random people in my phone list that I haven't talked to in years and just send a heart. Like I'm known for the red heart. If I send you a heart, it just means I'm thinking about you, right? That's all. I love you. I miss you. I'm thinking about you. That's it. And I make sure I do that. I've had a lot of death in my life. I've lost a lot of friends from the time I was really young. So I think that has impacted me in that way where it is always important to me that I let people know how I feel about them. I always want you to know that you've impacted my life and I love you for it. And I'm so grateful for that. So I think that's another superpower because it's life-changing for people, right? Like to feel that from somebody is life-changing. And adding on to that, I would say being able to say I'm sorry, which I learned in AA, right? We make amends. And it was the most powerful part of all the steps for me. It was such a it was such an empowering thing, because all your amends don't go well, right? Not everybody is thrilled to hear your apology. And some people won't even talk to you to hear your apology. But I remember walking away from an amends and I had met my friend at a restaurant and had this conversation. And I remember leaving afterwards and just thinking, like, wow, if you can do this, like you can do anything. Like literally. I mean, sitting across a table from somebody and just owning all of your ugliness and your bad decisions, every embarrassing piece of it, and just owning it, not rationalizing, not justifying, not, I'm so sorry I did that, but I did it because, right? None of that drama, just like, dude, I'm sorry. Like I sucked and I'm really sorry for that. And amends also, it's not only about saying I'm sorry, it's saying I'm going to be different. This is not going to be my behavior anymore. And I hope you'll accept my apology and allow me the opportunity to show you how different I'm going to be moving forward. Right. And that is really life changing because most people get so caught up in ego that they can't just apologize. I love to apologize, dude. I love owning that. It's also a power move in a lot of situations to just step up. Like, Jocko Willink. Like that's what you do. You own it. You own every piece of your behavior, your decisions, everything ultimately falls on you. And to be able to do that and extend that type of love to other people, because I can almost always apologize for my delivery. It also doesn't mean saying I'm sorry doesn't mean you're saying you were wrong in whatever your point was or whatever. But I can almost always apologize for my delivery because I can be very short. I can be a little bit of a jerk, right? Especially if I'm in a hurry or if somebody has pushed a button, I can really be a jerk. So I can almost always apologize for that. Like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry about that. That's not how I wanted that to go down. I wish I would have said that better, or I wish I would have said that differently. And I apologize if, however that may have affected you. And I'll definitely watch myself moving forward. Like that's easy.
It's such a that is such a powerful, powerful point. I think in the healing journey is ownership and forgiveness. And it's two what I've discovered in my journey is it's two factor forgiveness. It's forgiving asking forgiveness from you when I have injured or hurt you, but it's also asking forgiveness of myself. And both for me were almost impossible. I almost found it harder to forgive myself. I mean,
For sure.
it was still brutal asking for your forgiveness, but it was like I will never forgive myself for hurting Angela or fill in the blank, right? Of all my people that
But
I've
this
hurt in
is
my life.
something I love about like amends. This is a way that most people don't think about this stuff, right? Think about how good you feel when somebody gives you that validation. When your wife comes to you and says, Noble, you know what? I'm really not proud of how I handled that conversation. I really wish I would have done better. I wish I would have listened better, whatever the thing is. Think about how validated you feel. Like she walks away from you and you're like, damn, I love her. Like, God, that was cool. That was so big of her. I can't believe she did that. I have so much respect for her for doing that. Right? Like, why wouldn't you want to make someone feel that way? That's how I think about it. Like, it feels so good. Why wouldn't you want to make other people feel that way?
Yeah, that's I intellectually, I understand what you're saying, and I think what has made forgiveness of myself and other people, and it when you're forgiving other people too, that dynamic, right? I think it's my pride and ego probably have gotten in the way in the past, but I mean, there's no doubt you're right. Like, because there have been some times where I have thankfully got it right and just owned the absolute crap. I mean, like super owned. Like I went through and listed all of the emotions that I caused my wife when I did or said X, right? And I wrote down, okay, this is probably these are probably the list of 10 or 15 different emotions that I made her feel when I said this or did this. These are and the way I made her feel this way was because I did these following 3, 5, 10 different behaviors, which led to her feeling these emotions, which then led to her following behaviors as a result of my behaviors, as a result of you know what I'm saying? Like I
Yeah.
and then I said, hey babe, here's let me so this is a multi-phase massive apology that I'm doing to you here. Okay.
Right.
So I'm saying super ninja sorry, but here's it's like 87 levels deep here. So just bear with me. I am sorry for the following, you know what I'm saying? And I went to a list and
Yeah.
she's like, and it was like the first time she's like, dude, that is like the first time I feel like you genuinely tried to understand the pain you caused me,
Yes.
right? And I'm
Yes.
like, oh, like that's like my
Validation.
my dumb ass, right? I'm like, oh, like is that what I've been missing this whole time? Right?
Yeah.
Again, low EQ, low self-awareness, low social awareness. Like I did not, I'm like, oh, got it. Okay. So the next time I piss you off, I need to really understand the pain that, anyway, so excellent, excellent,
Here, I'll give
Angie.
you a little tidbit
Yeah.
too if you wanna, like, never fight. Wait, I'm not a fighter, right? I'll communicate you to death, but I do not fight and argue. Um, and things can get tense, right? Everybody gets a little uncomfortable, your buttons get pushed, but you have to be able to talk through that stuff, certainly with someone you love. But I will say, if things are getting tense, I will say, like, "Hey, hang on a second, like, I just wanna say right now, I don't want this to be a fight." I don't want this to get ugly, right? Like, I want us to understand each other and I don't want this to get crazy. So, if one of us needs to step away for a few minutes, like whatever that's going to look like, I just want you to know I do not want to fight, because it gives everybody a moment. And the other thing I would say too is when your person comes to you with something, the first thing you should always do is figure out how you can agree with them, whatever they said. Whether that's as simple as, "Oh, I see where you're coming from," or, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I could see how that would feel like that to you. Wasn't my intention, but I totally see how it felt like that to you." Right? See how you can jump on board with them. That's validation. That's gonna change the whole dynamic of a conversation. Just that one little piece. Like, "Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, yeah, I see where you're coming from." It could be as simple as, "Oh, yeah, I hear you. I hear that. Yeah, that does make sense." Whatever, but you gotta give your person, like, you have to let them know that you're listening, not hearing, but you're listening for what they're feeling, not their reaction, not what they're going through, but what they're actually feeling behind it. That's what you wanna figure out.
Right, right. And so one of the tools that I use, that I do for me, and recommend to others, is because I sucked at whatever, all that you just got done saying. I sucked at it. So I had to develop another kind of cheat sheet thing for me. And that was, I learned in the military. It's the back brief. Okay, so Angela, let me back brief you on what I heard, what I think I heard you say, and then you tell me, Angela. I want you to tell me if I'm on track or off track. Okay, so what I heard you say was, I really made you feel, and I made you feel hurt, upset, frustrated, angry, rejected, uh,
Minimized.
minute, right? I'll go down the list, and then I'll say, okay, Angela, so on a scale from 1 to 10, how well do you feel I understand the pain that I caused you, on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being I nailed it exactly, or 1 being I missed the whole boat. Well, no, but I think you're like an 8. Then I'll say this, okay, Angela, I don't want to move on until you get me to at least a 9. And then once
Right.
I get to 9, get me to a 10, right? And so what did I miss? Tell me, what did I miss? I want to know,
Yeah.
because I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Because I
And
used to
listen,
suck at this.
questions will get you everywhere too. Like this is the other thing in communication is shut up and ask questions, right? Don't immediately jump in and talk about yourself and your thoughts and whatever's happening for you. Like that's all we think
Right,
about, right?
right.
But stop, ask questions. Like, okay, give me a little more information on that. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure I understand. Explain that to me a little bit more. How did that happen? Did I say that? Like ask questions to clarify what's going on. Because remember, most of the people we're talking to don't have great emotional intelligence either. Right. So even when we're trying to say what's bothering us, we're not doing a very good job either. And we're missing the mark, even explaining ourselves. So the more you can be there and just be supportive and be like, okay, wait, I want to hear more about that. I'm not sure I understand. I'm not following. Give me a little more information on that. Whatever. Like, ask some questions so that you really understand whatever it is they're trying to say. And then you can thoughtfully respond instead of getting caught up in, I want you to hear me. I want you to tell me I'm right. I want you to know how I feel. We're very self absorbed as humans.
Right, right. Well, and the other thing that I would do is, oh my gosh, it's embarrassing how clueless I was for 2 decades for my wife. But I would immediately go to ego preservation mode, right? So I would
Mhm.
get defensive, and
Yes.
it was 100% about me.
Yes.
It's this is how clueless I was. And I was literally a 40-year-old, 5-year-old, emotional 5-year-old. Literally, not even exaggerating. Like she would tell me her hurt or her pain, whatever, and I would immediately make it about me. Like,
Yeah.
and that's like, and again, now thank God, as I'm working on EQ, it's like, it's unreal how, but now that I see, like, okay, I was legit an emotional 5-year-old, that, which is, I behaved consistent with how a 5-year-old behaves, right? Because it is
Yep.
about the 5-year-old. They're not thinking about you, or
Yep.
right. It's so anyway. That's
I say
excellent.
that all the time, by the way. I always say that. It's like, because basically I'm 5. This is
Right,
one of
right,
my favorite lines,
right,
is
right,
basically I'm 5, and it's gonna come out as a temper tantrum in one way or another, right? It looks a little different as an adult, but not much.
right,
I just don't throw myself on the floor most of the time,
right,
but the temper tantrum is coming, whatever that might look like now.
right, right. Well, and the healthier that I've gotten emotionally, the so thankfully my tantrums, and I call them incredible Hulk phases, because I would go rage mode
Rage.
in
Mhm.
in a split second. So the frequency has decreased of my Hulk modes. The frequency, the duration of my Hulk modes has decreased, and now the intensity of the Hulk modes have decreased. So now, where I would go to a 10, and I mean, I'd probably have 3 adult temper tantrums a week, easy. Now, my my Hulk mode goes to a 4. So
Right.
I never get to a 10 anymore. Praise the
Right.
Lord. I'll get to a 4, and that may happen, or maybe a 6. Okay, so maybe I gave myself too much. Maybe a 6, but that happens maybe, man, once every 6 months now,
Yeah.
where it was easy three times a week without even thinking
Right.
about it, right? So
Okay, so this will go with your food stuff too, right? Because again, this is where a level of commitment is when you start to understand it, because it's about managing your emotions all day, every day. It's about consistent self care to keep your baseline at a 2. So when you're triggered, you're only jumping to a 4. But if your baseline is at a freaking 7 all day, every day, and you're triggered, then you're jumping up to a 15 and it's out of control, right? So, this is the same thing with those commitments. I have to do things consistently throughout my day to keep my resolve strong and keep my goals top of mind, keep my stress and anxiety low. So I'm less apt to say F it and grab the ice cream, right? Because I will sit in my house and I will starve to death. If I don't have any food, I will not go get any. I'm so lazy. But then an ice cream commercial comes on. All of a sudden, in seconds, I'm up. I got shoes on, I got my purse, and we're going to the car. Like, I will starve to death, but I will get up and drive to the store to get ice cream, right? So I have to all day long be doing things. And that's what I'm saying. Like in the morning, it's journal meditation. Mid-morning, I'm doing something else, and it might only be a couple of minutes, but I'm taking a minute. I'm shutting down electronics. Sometimes I do laps just around my apartment, right? Just to chill out and be unplugged and just take a minute and be up, you know? At lunchtime, I do something else, usually another meditation, or for me, I'll do the NSDR because I don't sleep well. And that non-sleep deep rest replenishes your body as if you got more sleep. I can do it in 10 minutes. It takes nothing, right? But those are the things that let you know how committed you are, right? I have reminders on my phone, affirmations. I've got an app that sends me 3 times a day affirmations. And when that goes off, I know shut things down for a few minutes and give my energy and focus to those affirmations because it brings my baseline down. And then I'm really more mindful of loving myself and wanting to make better choices. And my strength and resolve is more because I'm consistently doing those things. That doesn't mean it's a win every day, right? It doesn't mean every day I'm knocking it out of the park, but I'm making decisions that I don't want to make far less when I'm really on top of that self care and my mental health. That's what it's all about. That's your commitment.
that's fire. That's fire. Just on your last point there, my decision making exponentially drops the more fatigued I get.
A
Right.
1000%.
So
Yes.
if I
That's
don't
a
manage,
real thing. That's a
oh,
real thing
okay,
because your
okay,
brain is tired. It's called decision fatigue because your brain, think about how much information comes in your brain all day, every day. This is also how you end up eating the 15 candy bars and not realizing it, right? Because your brain puts things on autopilot to conserve energy because it's doing thousands of decisions a day, thousands and thousands. Every move you make, it's functioning your whole body, every movement, driving to work. What are you going to eat? What are you not going to eat? Saying hi to this person, not this person. I mean, thousands of decisions your brain is in all the time. So when you get toward the end of the day, that's why this is everybody's witching hour, your brain is tired, dude. It's tired. It's worn out. It can't fight the way it could fight at 8 a.m. It can't fight cravings and urges and thoughts and habits. It just can't. It's tired. But if you're replenishing throughout the day, then you're replenishing its strength.
yeah, that's
This is
great.
how neuroscience changed my life. Like, honestly, once I started
Wow.
learning about neuro, even in my sobriety, everything I did was really based on neuroscience because
Mm,
I felt like that was proof for me, right? I was like, if I know how my brain does it, then I know exactly what to do, how to do it, and I'm
wow,
creating lasting change,
wow, yeah,
and that's how I
yeah,
do everything.
wow. I, that is awesome. Uh, Excellent. I'm just making a note there for myself on your excellent, excellent, Angela. This has been fire. Um, Super stoked. Can't thank you enough. Can you tell us now, kind of wrapping up here, like how do we find you? How do we follow you? What resources do you have? Website, and any of that stuff?
All the things. So you can find me pretty much everywhere at Addiction Unlimited. Addiction Unlimited is my podcast. I'm on all the socials as Addiction Unlimited. You can find me everywhere there. Addictionunlimited.com, of course. I work with people privately only one way because in my niche with drinking, your commitment really has to be there or my services aren't helpful. People ask me all the time, like, why don't you do single coaching sessions? And I'm like, because you're not going to accomplish anything in a single coaching session. Like, this is an ongoing journey. Like, we have to do some work together. And if you only want to commit to a single session, then you're not in the right place. And I don't want to take your money. It's not going to be a good experience for either one of us. So I do have a 6-week program that I do that is phenomenal, incredible community. I've got an incredible community. I just am so in love with my people. It's crazy. In our groups and our membership and our Facebook group. I mean, just phenomenal human beings.
That's awesome. So we can find out about the 6-week program and all that stuff on at addictionunlimited.com.
Addictionunlimited.com. Yeah.
Okay,
Or
okay,
any of the
okay,
socials. I talk about all the things.
okay, okay. Excellent.
And
Angela,
listening to my podcast, of course, I always say it in my podcast, and it's always linked in show notes and all that good stuff.
okay.
And listen, Noble, for all your people, they can find your episode on my podcast at addictionunlimited.com/341, because you're episode 341, addictionunlimited.com/341. They'll find your episode.
Perfect. Thank you, Angela. This has been absolutely amazing. So grateful for you. Thank you for all the blood, sweat, and tears that you have invested in your own life to where you're adding value to thousands of people. So grateful for you.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a pleasure to meet you.